Я радий вітати всіх учасників сьогоднішнього вебінару, присвяченого ознайомленню з досвідом уряду Республіки Латвія у імплементації положень 36-ї директиви ЄС 2005 року щодо регульованих професій, представленим у презентації результатів проєкту під назвою «Визнання професійних кваліфікацій». Цим досвідом з нами поділиться пані Інесе Стуре, старший експерт, координаторка з питань визнання професійних кваліфікацій Департаменту політичних ініціатив та розвитку Міністерства освіти і науки Республіки Латвія, за що висловлює їм велику шану і вдячність від Національного агентства кваліфікацій і української сторони. Мета сьогоднішнього заходу – розпочати серію вебінарів, присвячених обговоренню розроблення дорожньої карти для України щодо законодавчого оформлення впровадження системи нерегульованих професій та відповідної термінології, визначення для національного балансу між принципами вільного доступу до професіями і рівнях безпеки людини і держави у певних сферах, запорукою яких є, зокрема, регульовані професії. Такий невеличкий вступ перед тим, як передати слово модератору. Я, як заступник голови Національного агентства кваліфікації, радий вітати всіх учасників і побажати насамперед результативності і конкретних, скажімо так, пропозицій від всіх стейкхолдерів і зацікавлених сторін щодо розв'язання, скажімо, системи регульованих професій на законодавчому рівні в Україні. Дякую за увагу. Передаю слово модератору сьогоднішнього заходу, пані Світлані Зайцевій.
Дякую, пане Дмитре. Доброго дня, шановні учасники. Вітаємо вас на вебінарі, присвяченому визнанню професійних кваліфікацій для регульованих професій на тему законодавству у сфері регулювання професій. Мене звати Світлана, і я буду модератором сьогоднішньої зустрічі. Попереджаємо всіх учасників про запис вебінару, і якщо хтось проти, то можливим є відключення від трансляції. Щодо мети вебінару, як сказав Дмитро Олексійович, є інформування щодо досвіду Республіки Латвія з питань формування та впровадження законодавчих і нормативних положень, які фіксують необхідність володіння певною професійною кваліфікацією для доступу до професійної діяльності. Спікером сьогоднішнього вебінару є старша експертка, координаторка з питань визнання професійних кваліфікацій Департаменту політичних ініціатив та розвитку Міністерства освіти і науки Республіки Латвія, пані Інесе Стуре. Раді вітати вас. І учасниками вебінару є запрошені до участі представники Міністерства освіти і науки України, Міністерства охорони здоров'я України, Міністерства економіки, довкілля та сільського господарства України, Міністерства культури та стратегічних комунікацій України, Міністерства молоді та спорту України, а також Міністерства розвитку громад та територій України. Також присутні представники Державної служби України з питань безпечності харчових продуктів та захисту споживачів, а також представники Конфедерації будівельників України, спільного представницького органу сторони роботодавців на національному рівні та спільного представницького органу репрезентативних всеукраїнських об'єднань профспілок на національному рівні. Також варто зазначити, що цей захід організовано за підтримки мультидонорської ініціативи проєкту Skills for Recovery. Також варто наголосити на наших правилах взаємодії і окреслити організаційні моменти. Всі запитання свої ви можете записати у чат, і під час сесії запитання-відповідь ми їх розглянемо, якщо вони стосуються безпосередньо теми вебінару. На всі інші питання, які стосуються також теми вебінару безпосередньо, зокрема і на ті, що були поставлені під час реєстрації на вебінар, буде надано у письмовому вигляді відповіді на сторінках у соціальній мережі Facebook та на офіційному сайті Національного агентства кваліфікацій. Також варто зазначити, що запис вебінару буде доступний після закінчення нашої зустрічі у англомовній версії. Для учасників також присутній синхронний переклад. А також просимо вас бути вічливими один до одного і вимикати під час промов спікерів свої мікрофони. Ставимось один до одного з повагою. Зараз передаю слово спікерці нашого вебінару, пані Інесе Стуре. Пані Інес, прошу.
Thank you very much for this very great introduction to this webinar. I really appreciate this invitation and this opportunity to share our Latvian experience. And as I heard from this introduction, they are presenting our colleagues from so many ministries, and it's very, very important. And I think many of regulated professions are under your political agenda, and therefore it's very important to have this overall picture over all this field. Thank you. Now I think we will start with the presentation. Yes, please open it, and we will begin my story. From the beginning, yes, so thank you. So it's first webinar out of 3, which is under this common title, Recognition of Professional Qualifications Project, and it's devoted to legislation on the regulation of professions. This presentation is constructed around questions what I received from Qualifications Agency from Ukraine, and I really appreciated your deep interest and this list of questions, because it was very useful for me to see what exactly interests of you, what is relevant and important topics for you, what I should explain here today, and I tried to include every one question in our this presentation, and will do my best to answer these questions. Let's go. Next slide. So there is a general overview of topics which will be covered. First, the major question is a list of regulated professions. How is created this list of regulated professions out of thousands of professions and qualifications which are existing today? The question about competent authorities, proportionality assessments, a very, very important question, since we know there is a special directive of Commission devoted to proportionality assessments. And the next question is a training in regulated professions. It's about obtaining of education and qualification. And the last question is most tricky one, roadmap for implementation of a directive. Yes, and we will cover during this presentation all these topics. Thank you. Let's go to next slide. So this title part of the slides, you will see actually more or less copy-paste questions from your document what I have received. So the question is about architecture of the regulatory framework. Is it a single law, or is it a package of regulatory acts? And there is also requests for example what illustrates it and how regulatory requirements are formulated. I have to say that Latvia uses a package of regulatory acts approach. So regulatory requirements in Latvia combine, first of all, primary legislation. It is legal acts which are most important and have a higher legal power. The highest is constitution, and next is laws, and then followed by cabinet regulations and orders. So it's a primary legislation, secondary legislation, and also professional body involvement. It means that professional bodies, professional associations also have their inner some regulations, codes, ethical codes, which also are compulsory and must be taken into account. And the main provisions are set in our specific law on regulated professions and recognition of professional qualifications. As you see, these both parts are combined in one law: regulation of professions and recognition of qualifications, because it's are really very much combined together. It's are two sides of the same coin. Recognition is applicable to regulated professions and in opposite. So let's go to next slide, please. So how the list of regulated professions is changed and supplemented? So in Latvia, a profession is considered as regulated if its requirements are set by law, specifically in this law on regulated professions, and legal acts of specific professional sector. It means it's almost doubling of legal norms. There is a certain overlap, but we find it as a very useful because then this regulation is applicable and it's more easily for use for people who are maybe dealing with their sectoral questions and are not maybe very skillful and very knowledgeable in some norms regarding regulation, and it's just practical reasons why we put it one in same law, then it's more easily applicable. But of course, we have to always bear in mind this, what is said in a second bullet point, that regulation of professions underscores a critical balance enshrined in the country's constitution. It calls in satversme Latvia. So the rights of individuals to freely choose their employment. Because if it's a regulation, it means that we are limit these rights of individuals to freely choose their employment. There are special requirements. People cannot do what they want. They have to fulfill their requirements. And if it's such a very serious and important limitation of human rights, it must be allowed by constitution to do so. And therefore, regulation of professions is really a very important field. And there must be balanced public rights to receive good quality and services, and also rights of individual to do what they want in their life. Thank you. The next slide, please. So, and then we are coming to this practical example, how it's explained, how it looks like in our in our legislation. So there is one example of regulated profession of psychologist. You see there are 3 columns, and one first column is a general legislation. You see there is a in law on regulated professions. is included this profession, and it means that from the law of regulated professions follows that professional title of psychologist is regulated. And in this law, there is a reference to qualification requirements that is defined in sectoral legislation. And also from this law on regulated professions follows that if someone from abroad, person obtained psychologist qualification abroad, wants to work in Latvia, this person must recognize his or her qualification. So, but in sectoral legislation, there is a special psychologist law which defines qualification requirements, defines regulated activities, what exactly psychologists do, what exactly are regulate qualification requirements for these professional activities. And also in this cabinet regulations following psychologist laws, there are defined all procedures, how they can obtain their certificates, and how this psychologist can get access to professional practice. And also in cabinet regulations are all duties and rights of involved parties are defined. And there is also a specific organization called Certification Council of Psychologists, which is created by psychologists who defines their representatives to this council. And this council are testing these psychologists in practice. They are assessing their qualification. They're making decisions on certification. And also they are responsible for decisions on recognition of qualification, as well as they are responsible for professional standards and ethical norms. And as you see, this is in this schematic schema is explained regulation of one specific profession, psychologist. So it's defined in law on regulated professions as well as sectoral legislation. And this principle is enforced for all regulated professions. So if it's a regulated profession in construction sector, then it's regulation is in both in law on regulated professions, but much more specifically, much more in detail and in the practical application in sectoral legislation on construction. As well as for instance, for healthcare, all healthcare professions are defined in healthcare and medicine legislation. So really, regulatory requirements are a blend of legal norms, administrative procedures, professional self-governance, and also many stakeholders are involved here. And so, dear colleagues, those of you who are civil servants like me can, looking at this schema, definitely see how much administrative burden it takes, because this one square requires documentation, drafting of legal acts, processing of acceptance, public consultations. It's a very, very big administrative burden, and it is justifiable only in a serious, if it's a serious reasons. Therefore, in general, let's regulate as little as possible, and let's regulate only what is really necessary, just to avoid this unnecessary administrative burden and unnecessary our waste of time and our efforts. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, and there is some citation of our legislative acts of these two laws, how it's really expressed in laws, how it's defined. There are only main laws. So it's about the same profession of psychologists. So it's in a law on regulated professions. There is a one special section, 32.7. So it's requirements for regulated profession in the field of psychology. So it's clearly said that regulated profession, so be a psychologist. And there is a special psychologist law. There is section 3. There is said the right to pursue the professional activity of a psychologist. In one other place, there is said what is professional activity of psychologists. So regulated activities are also clearly defined. So, and as you see in its part 1, there is said that a person's right to pursue independent professional activity shall be confirmed by a diploma of higher education and acquisition of a bachelor degree, master degree, and also amount at least 200 credit points. And there is also mentioned that this person must be registered in a register of psychologists and must also receive psychologist's certificate in a certain field of activity. So, and all these procedures about what are requirements for the study programs, what are requirements for registration, who holds this register, what are procedures for getting certificate, how long is this certificate is valid. All these things are said in determined in a cabinet regulation. So it's one example how it looks like in our legislation. It works for us. Yeah. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, and that was a very interesting question from you. Thank you for it. And there is a mentioned state regulatory service, if it could determine the level of regulation. Actually, this is a question what I can't answer because I really am not familiar in such a detail what is state regulatory service responsible for, what its duties and legal power. So this is, it will remain unanswered, but there is very interesting wording, level of regulation. Level of regulation. Thank you for thinking in this field. I don't know who is the author of this phrase, but thank you very much. Because you know, level, what is level? Level can be high and level can be low. If level is high, it means there is a lot of regulation. And if level is low, there is a little less of regulation. So, and really in all regulation theory, in OECD and Commission and also in some theoretical research, this level of regulation is very topical, thematic, and it's really how much we regulate. It means how many requirements we are asking from this person to fulfill, to get this access to professions. And there you see listed some examples of different regulation requirements. So we can require regulated activities. We can require specific education. We can require a compulsory professional experience, certification, registration, compulsory continuous professional training, obligation of professional insurance. So, and as I know, some professions in Ukraine also asking personal seal. It was for land surveyors. If there are so many this regulation requirements, then this level is very high. So for our Latvian psychologists, probably only obligation of professional insurance and personal seal is not required. But what is important, every one of these requirements must be defined in legal acts. And everyone, look at the left, so it's a subject for proportionality assessment. So you can't voluntarily say, dear professional, go and fulfill these requirements if you have not assessed if it's really needed and if it's really justifiable. And in general, of course, it must be required and included in all these regulatory requirements only in a case if it's really needed. So this level of regulation must be maintained as low as possible. Yes, but this way of thinking is about level of regulation is very correct, and I really appreciate this question. Thank you. Next slide, please. How regulated professions can be excluded from the list? Exactly in an opposite process as it can be included. So if we define some compulsory requirements for dealing for access to professional activities in this profession, then we make amendments in law and include this profession in law. So, and if in some moments this regulation is found disproportionate or no longer is justified, there is no need to longer regulate this profession. It should be modified or removed from the list of regulated professions, or this process is called deregulation. So it's happens by amendments in a law on regulated professions. I have to say that recently, in last years, some countries went through major deregulation process. For instance, Greece deregulated accountants, and they found that it gave very good effects to economy. Services for accounting became cheaper, and because it was open market rules that began to operate in this accounting field. And also Poland, if I'm not mistaken, deregulated taxi drivers or some such professions where they found there is no need to keep regulation on all this administrative burden. We also have some examples of deregulation. We had a regulated profession of tourist guide It was regulated in 2006 and deregulated 4 years later, 2010. But again, those who are involved in a drafting of legal acts knows how much work it requires, drafting, processing, consultation, accepting, publication. So it's a really very big resource was wasted for this profession. There is no need to regulate tourist guides because there is no real risks of harm to public interests. Yeah, maybe some tourist guides can tell some, I don't know, fairy tales about heritage if you come as a tourist, but it will be very serious harm to your health or also to your security or some other real your public interests, probably not. And so it's really no need to regulate this profession. Thank you. Next slide, please. How often are changes made in the list of regulated professions? Changes are really uncommon exactly due to this significant administrative workload what is involved in this process. Actually, but there are also nuances. Professional associations generally and usually they are very interested to regulate their professions. It's natural because they regard their professions as most important, most valuable. Of course, it's everyone professional thinks so high about their profession. But their requests of professional associations must be carefully examined to ensure that access to professional activities is not unnecessarily restricted. So decision-making body must be public sector, public institutions, probably those who are which are responsible for public policy in this sector. And of course, there are consultations and discussions with the professional associations, but decision-making must be in delegated power of public institutions like ministries or parliament. Actually, changes in our list of regulated professions, unfortunately, mostly in a direction of adding new professions. And exactly now we are discussing and preparing amendments in a law to include 2 more regulated professions. It's a profession of advanced nurse. So it's a nurse with a master level education, which will be allowed to fulfill very specific procedures in medicine, in healthcare. And the next profession is auto driving instructor, which also will be included in a list of our regulated professions, but it requires really a lot of work from our colleagues from Ministry of Health and from Ministry of Transport. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. Then we are coming to determining of competent authorities. Yes, it's according to directive, every one profession must be under the roof of certain competent authority, which making decisions about recognition of qualification and also some if some professional from our country wants to go abroad, this competent authority must also deal with this case. So also in a law on regulated professions, there in a section 36, where are defined all duties of and competence of Cabinet of Ministers in this field. There is said that Cabinet of Ministers shall determine the information authorities and authorities issuing the certificates of the recognition of professional qualifications. It means that Cabinet of Ministers is determining this competent authority. And in a result, as you see in this gray box, we have very special cabinet regulation number 566, where all our competent authorities are defined. Of course, it happens according to proposal of relevant ministry. Of course, every ministry knows at best what happens in their field, which professional associations can be trusted to make such decisions, and or which institutions are responsible for recognition of qualifications. So, but yeah, it's not free flow process. There is a nomination of competent institutions in our legislative acts. Thank you. Next slide, please. In practice, how it happens in practice. Actually, there is no uniform approach to delegating decision-making authority to specific institutions. In every profession, it happens differently and according to, let's say, real situation. Generally, there is a tendency to rely on professional associations. Yeah, but not every one profession has such strong professional association that can effectively carry out all the necessary administrative functions, because this association needs to have administrative legal staff, because it's a legal documents which must be prepared and process according to some administrative law procedures. There must be website with regularly updated information. There must be office for in-person visits, and not every one association has such facilities. As a rule, our professional associations are not supported from state finances, so their finances are constituted by donations of their members, and sometimes they are not so strong to carry out, to have such to be able to carry out these processes in some really some serious and normal way, what we expect from these procedures. So in these cases, usually processing of this recognition of qualifications is carried out by state institutions. And state institutions, of course, are always much more, let's say, professional in this work. And also, as the fact is that the number of applications for recognition of qualification is quite low, and therefore also it's quite difficult for them to gather necessary experience also. So thank you. Next slide, please. Are professional organizations involved in assessing labor market needs? It's a little bit the question side from our focus to regulation of professions, but of course it's also, but in same time also, of course, it's related to it, but definitely labor market forecasts are derived from the economic development and demographic scenarios. And it's under the Ministry of Economics. There is a special department dealing with it. And professional organizations play a key role in establishing professional standards. What is it's their real know-how that they're involved in establishing professional standards. It means professional organizations are really interested to have professionals which qualification corresponds to labor market needs. And therefore, they include these needs and actual requirements into a document called professional standards. And then all educational programs which are implemented in our educational institutions have to take into mind this professional standards, and they must also be approved in the process of accreditation, which is a part of regular quality assessment. Thank you. Next slide, please. What is the role of employers or their associations in shaping requirements for regulated professions? I have to say that there is no specific role designated for employers or their associations in shaping the requirements for regulated professions. And the reasons I described earlier, that is, as regulation of professions is so much about limiting individuals from their rights of freely choose their occupation, it must be a fully responsibility of public institutions to define what is regulated profession and in which cases these limitations are justifiable. Because ask any professional association and they will say most probably their profession must be regulated because it's so important, super important profession. It's natural, let's say, instinct of every professional association. But of course they are stakeholders which are involved in public consultations during the general legislative process, and their voice is heard and is given space to express all their opinions, and it's also taken into mind and taken into consideration during the legislative process, but it's not a decisive power given to such organizations, because it's said in a last bullet point, the aims of regulation professions are based on protecting public interests rather than facilitating business growth or limit access to labor market, what sometimes can be also protection of labor market from newcomers. It's also sometimes interest of professional bodies. Thank you. Next slide, please. Appointment of national coordinator and his responsibilities according to directive. Yes, the directive says that every country must appoint national coordinator. In our country, it's me. This process also is defined in our general law on regulated professions. So there is section 56 functions. And there is said that cabinet shall approve the coordinator for recognition of professional qualifications. And finally, in this gray box is a special cabinet order issued about appointment of the coordinator, which serves as a coordinator for purposes of this directive. And the law also defines main duties and competencies, what is coordinator responsible for. So it's a quite general duties according to directive. So every one point of directive must be transposed and written, included somewhere in our legislative acts. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, we are coming to a very interesting part. It is proportionality, application of proportionality test. As you know, we have a special proportionality directive, proportionality test directive. It is Directive 2018-958. So it's a new directive. And the reasons and aim of this directive was actually to somehow limit, let's say, enthusiasm to regulate professions. And because it was discovered that regulation of professions is growing so rapidly, and it creates real unnecessary obstacles for labor market movements and free movement of professionals. So, and it was also calculated that GDP of EU could grow about 10% if deregulation could take place. So, and therefore this new directive was accepted with very, very long discussions and hard discussions about it. Application of proportionality test, by which body, in what order. So what we did in Latvia, we also made amendments into the law, actually much later than it was required, because we couldn't also manage so easily transposition of all these provisions of this directive. It was 3 years later than it was necessary, but it is how it is. And there is an included new section on proportionality test, and there is clearly said that proportionality test shall be performed by the ministry, which is the leading state administration institution in the field of policy corresponding to the regulated profession. So it means if it's a profession in medicine, healthcare, then it's the Ministry of Health responsible for it. If it's a regulated profession in education, some teacher or sport teacher, trainer, coach, then it's the Ministry of Education responsible for it. So we think there is a logic behind it. It means that, of course, every ministry which is responsible for the policy field must be aware what they want to regulate and why, what is the justification for regulation. And process and procedures of all this conducting of this proportionality test, there is also a special cabinet regulation number 617. European Commission has issued guidance on the assessment of proportionality according to this directive of proportionality test. There you can see a link to this guidance document. I really advise you, if you will begin some proportionality assessments, you can use this guidance document to see how this process must be performed. Thank you. Next slide. Is there a methodology for determining a profession as regulate? What determines in the national context whether a profession is regulated? Finally, regulation of profession is adopted by Parliament by amendments into the law. But of course, drafting of the amendments is a duty of, commonly, it's a duty of ministries, and ministries responsible for specific policy field are also proposing amendments in a law and including or excluding some professions in this list. And actually, if we talk about methodology, then since this proportionality test directive is adopted, methodology must be in accordance with the requirements of this proportionality test directive. So, and what most important is that we have to remember that public protection of public interests is the main reason why these professions have to be regulated, and public interests are defined in Article 6 of this proportionality test directive. It's this list of public interests is derived from case laws of Court of Justice, so it's also not freely made this list. So it's there is only few listed included in this on this slide. So it's public security, public health are main public interests, what must be protected by regulation of professions. So next slide, please. So, but in practical life, actually, there is also some common sense principles can be used. What risks to public interests may arise if access to certain professional activities is granted to anyone, regardless of their qualifications? Of course, probably we could imagine what could happen, for instance, if pharmacists wouldn't be a regulated profession. What could happen if anyone could work in an apotheke or pharmacy, and this person without special knowledge in this field and couldn't advise customers which medicine they could choose. Of course, there's a major risks to public health could arise, and definitely this, for instance, this one is activity what could be access to which could be definitely must be regulated, and the requirements for specific qualification is very justified. So, but of course, these risks must be evidence-based, reasonable, and justified. Therefore, for instance, as I mentioned before, for instance, for the profession of tourist guides, actually there is we couldn't find any serious risks to public interests to regulate this profession. In European Union, in other countries, there are thousands of very strange regulated professions, maybe from history, some from old times, which are regulated, and maybe only this tradition is regulated by tradition, but it's not justifiable. I was intrigued and curious to get to know, for instance, can you imagine a profession of taxidermist is regulated? Taxidermist, it's what makes these models from animal skin. Yeah, it's regulated in Norway. It's not the European Union, but they also apply this directive. Yeah, so actually no one can explain why this profession is regulated. And therefore, you are lucky that you are just creating your system. And so you have this very critical common sense thinking, and you also really can have this chance not to include all these professions into your regulated professions list, which are not really no need to regulate. Thank you. Next slide, please. Whether proportionality assessments allows deregulation of professions, and how often this proportionality test must be performed. And it's also said in our law that proportionality test shall be performed not less than once in 5 years, and taken into account the changes which have occurred since the last proportionality test. So the first 5 years haven't yet arrived. So this provision of this law is not realized yet. But definitely, if during this proportionality assessment will be found that this regulation is disproportionate or no longer justified, this profession must be deregulated, or maybe you remember level of regulation. Maybe this level of regulation can be lowered, so we can exclude some of regulation requirements which are not justifiable anymore. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, and there is Latvian experience. Which institutions are responsible for implementing and supporting the regulated professions system? So, and there we have almost all ministries of our cabinet of ministers, and the regulation of profession is determined by the ministry, is again, which is a leading state institution in a field of this policy corresponding to regulated profession. There are only few are mentioned here. So Ministry of Health, doctors, nurses, midwives, dentists, pharmacists, and all medicine professions like masseurs and physiotherapists and many others. There is a Ministry of Economics, which is in Latvia responsible for the sector of economic, for construction. There are architects, civil engineers, and also experts on energo efficiency are under this ministry. And so, in fact, these ministries are drafting regulation requirements. Of course, for instance, what requirements should we pose to civil engineers? Who knows it? The Ministry of Economics, which is responsible for construction sector, they know what requirements must be posed to civil engineers, what is the level of education requirement, how long professional practice, what is the content and scope of this professional practice, what is required to civil engineers to give them access to professional activities. And at the same time, Ministry of Economics is aware of also on the situation in this sector. Is it sufficient number of civil engineers? And usually it's insufficient number of civil engineers, and therefore they are also interested not to restrict access to professional activities. They are interested to facilitate flow of new professionals into this sector, and therefore their deep interest, of course, is ensure that they are qualified and at the same time are not necessarily restricted to access the profession. So there is also a number of other ministries, and me as a coordinator, really, I'm collaborating and discussing all these professions, regulation of professions with all ministries which are in charge for their policy field. So it's a special charm of regulation of professions that is really horizontal and practically really horizontal and involving all regulated sectors of public domain. Thank you. Next slide, please. So yeah, there is just schematic overview of our regulated professions, and as you see, almost 3/4 of our regulated professions in a healthcare. So it's a very high number of different specialties of doctors and specialties of nurses, and some of them are according to directives, some of them are according to national legislation, but healthcare is a most high number in a regulation of professions. Thank you. Next slide, please. Is there approved national strategy or roadmap for implementing PQD? It's a Professional Qualifications Directive. And I want to say that we do not have such a specific national strategy document for implementation of this PQD, and instead it's a process integrated into broader legislative framework, and mainly it's a law on regulated professions, which include all provisions of the directive. But directive is all the time in the process of amendments, especially annexes of this directive are experiencing ongoing amendments and also some other parts of directive. So it's this works is continuous, and all the time we are amending our law and amending our cabinet regulations for implementation of this directive. So you can't expect that you will implement and forget. It will not happen. So you will live all the time with these amendments. Thank you. Next time, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we now we arrive to education in regulated professions. I have to say that educational institutions that offer training in regulated professions, that they are providing study programs and with and issuing these qualifications in regulated professions, they must fulfill the qualification requirements set forth in the legislative acts for each specific profession, but there is no separate accreditation process. So for each profession, if it's regulated or unregulated, the process of accreditation is similar and all the same. So we have accreditation agency, which is responsible for accreditation of all study programs. It's a regular accreditation. Every 6 years it must carry it out, and there are independent experts involved to assess quality of these programs. So it's all according to external quality assurance standards and procedures. And the only maybe difference is small, that in the process of final decision making, the accreditation agency is seeking the coordinator's opinion on professional qualifications before making a decision. So as a coordinator, I'm informed that some of such programs is going through accreditation process, and I'm usually issuing opinion and looking if this program is corresponding to requirements set in our legislative acts. So there is no special procedure for regulated studies. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a very interesting question. Can Ukraine apply the requirements of PQD maybe partially during the transitional period? Yes. I think it's very much what you can do already now. For instance, one of major part of directive concerns principles of minimal training requirements for 7 key sectoral professions. Sectoral professions, it's some term used in a directive. It means doctors, nurses, dentists, veterinary surgeons, midwives, pharmacists, and architects. So in directives there is set special minimal training requirements, exactly how it is. It's a content, what exactly must be included in the content of studies for obtaining these qualifications, how long these studies must be, what level must be, what are entry requirements. For every of these professions are special these requirements. And definitely it would be very important if you could collect information on your studies in these sectoral professions, which universities, which schools are providing studies, what is the content of studies provided, and also of course it's very important to compare current studies, what is content of these study programs which are being provided with the requirements of PQD. And also, of course, identification of gaps, and then discussing with these universities how to introduce changes to align the studies with the requirements of a directive. It's not so easy process. It's not really so easy process because processes in education are also quite long. They have long inners from physics, you know. It's long lasting. It's not easy to introduce changes quickly in education and especially in the highest levels, because these studies are also very complicated. For instance, you know how our doctors are obtaining their qualifications, are involved hospitals and organization of these studies and clinical practice and how long hours and all this stuff. It's so difficult established, and sometimes it's so rigid and very reluctant to changes. So it's not easy to change. Yeah, but definitely. Therefore, you could start earlier to be better prepared at the moment when this integration in you will take place in very speedy process. Yeah, and you also have to consider what you will do with qualifications obtained before accession in EU. For instance, if someone obtained a qualification 10 or 20 years ago, or even 30 years ago, how this qualification is, what is the content, how much is aligned with the requirements of directive, because it's very possible that this person, if, for instance, nurse will want to go to abroad to work as a nurse, so this person will want to use her rights as a free movement, which is a right of EU. This person will not have to use these rights because her qualification will not be in line with directive, and it will be quite an unfavorable situation for this person. Yeah, so you also have to obtain information about these qualifications obtained abroad, and to see how it's possible to help these people to update their knowledge. Then, of course, and all these minimal training requirements, as it said in third bullet point, it must be included into legislation. determining content and duration, the requirements for these qualifications. And if it's law or cabinet regulation, it's how it's corresponds to your system of legislation in this sector. So thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, there is one example of what I found in the internet. I just Googled it and found that at least 8 universities in Ukraine are providing education and giving qualification of architects. Yeah. Most probably, I haven't studied and analyzed it in details, but most probably all these universities are providing their unique studies in architecture. Probably they have some distinguished architectural professors who knows the best architecture and including their specific, very specific and individual content of studies in these study programs. Yeah, but what is exactly duration, content of the studies, and which of the studies are in line with directive, and yeah, and what are documents which are issued after graduation, because the titles of these documents should be included into annex of the directive. Yeah, but it's only about architecture. Yeah, your task is much more complicated than ours. When we accessed TU, we had only one university providing education in architecture, but Ukraine is a much larger country, and you have much more challenging situation what to deal with. Thank you. So and maybe next slide, shortly I will answer about national classifier of professions, and does it have to separately market for regulated professions? And I will shortly answer that classification of professions is a special cabinet regulation, and it's about issued under different law, under the labor law and statistics law, and it is related to standard classification of occupations, ISCO 808, and it's not related with regulation of professions. So, and there is about 3,290 professions, and now any mark if it's regulated or regulated, so all professions are included there. Thank you. And now it's so-called roadmap, but please be critical to this roadmap. What I made. Maybe there are some few steps. There is a phase 1, phase 1A and phase 1B, which could be, I think, performed in parallel. But actually, I see our time is already extincting, and maybe we can skip all this roadmap, and you can see it, and I can answer maybe questions, right? Ina, what, or Svetlana, what do you think? Yeah.
Так, ми можемо перейти до запитань, які є в чаті, а також є
Just a
учасники,
moment.
які підняли руку, наприклад, пан
Because
Дмитро. Чи як кажете, як вам
I hope
зручніше зараз?
this presentation will be sent to your participants. You will send the presentation to participants of this webinar, right? And they will
Так,
receive
в
it.
контактних...
And there is also my email and yes, thank you. And there is my email and you feel free to contact me and ask anything in particular. Yes, and now probably we can switch to questions. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Stewart, many thanks for your presentation. It's really important and valuable issue for Ukraine. Actually, I want to...
I'm sorry, Dmitry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question. Could you please repeat from a beginning?
Okay. Firstly, many thanks for your presentation. And regarding the question, I want to make some amendments, maybe. Not a question, but a question by the end of my speech. You started with very important notice that regulation in some professions and qualification is somehow well, could be violation of human rights in case it's not evidence-based, in case it's not proportional, in case it's not reasonable. Yeah, actually, it's a discrimination test came from European Court of Human Rights practice for understanding of discrimination. And my question and maybe some words is about current situation in Ukraine. You know, there's a martial law in Ukraine, and somehow some rights are restricted because of martial law. We informed European Union, Council of Europe, and United Nations regarding it. But at the same time, in a way of lack of employees and some lack of specialists and professionals in some way, maybe it can be a good practice to maybe make these qualifications and these requirements lower. I give you two examples. First one, I mentioned, now I'm a manager for international projects at the University of Customs and Finance, but 3 years ago I worked for private university in Dnipro. And I was a MON specialist of admission commission. And quite experienced woman in social work came to us for a master degree, to enroll on master degree program in psychology. You mentioned psychology, that somehow make me remember this. And she has huge experience in psychology, but at the same time, she was master in social work, and this field is somehow related to psychology. And our internal requirement, like national requirements, required her to obtain master degree in psychology. Now there is a huge lack of psychologists in Ukraine, and a lot of students, my colleagues from other universities can confirm it, that quite a lot of like newcomers come to psychology bachelor program and master as well. So maybe it's a good idea to... What? I don't understand. Actually, and second one is for...
Пане Дмитре, ми просимо вас уточнити
second-
питання і завершувати, тому що час спливає, а в нас ще є питання в чаті. Тому, будь ласка,
Okay,
стисліше.
so question is, do you think that during martial law there could be some preferences for preferences in a way of lower these qualification requirements for some profession like psychologists, or for example, offices for veterans assistants. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I don't know, of course, specifically this law, but in general, of course, it could be broadened possibilities to access profession for different qualifications, especially in situation what you described, that there is a real shortage of these professionals. And maybe you can provide some maybe short-term, 20, 30 or 50 hours, some courses, these persons with different qualifications could learn to get this, let's say, basic knowledge of this profession and to be able to practice. Maybe you will not let's say get 100% of quality, but maybe you will get 85 or 90% of this quality of services they will provide, but it's much better than nothing, and than to restrict access and require unrealistic requirements. Yeah, but thank you very much for this question and this very realistic and situation related this thinking. I really think it's a key in this domain. Yeah, thank you.
Many thanks.
Дякуємо. Пані Інно, у вас піднята рука.
Так, щиро дякую. Хочу окремо подякувати пані Інесе за відповіді на питання, які ми попередньо надали для того, щоб сформувати концепт і конструкт не тільки цього вебінару, а й наступних вебінарів, бо це перший вебінар з серії по регульованих професіях. Згодом по тексту вашого виступу ми з пані Наталею отримали багато відповідей на питання, але, як я і сказала на початку, ці відповіді призвели до інших запитань, які я намагалася викласти в чаті. Бачу, що колеги мої доєдналися до запитань, які виникали по ходу. Розумію, що відповісти на всі питання зараз ми не зможемо, тому що, на жаль, час замалий, але ми попередньо домовлялися, що ми зможемо отримати відповіді на ці питання письмово. І одразу хочу сказати, що всі відповіді на всі питання ми розмістимо на сайті Національної агентства кваліфікацій і у сторінці ФБ. Будь ласка, слідкуйте за... Це я учасникам вже говорю. Слідкуйте за посиланнями, слідкуйте за повідомленнями. Жодне з питань не залишиться без відповіді. І ті, які були закладені в реєстраційну форму, лише один критерій буде. Це питання має стосуватися теми вебінару, тобто регульованих професій. Тому я ще раз особисто дякую пані Інесе. Пані Наталя, ви хочете щось додати? Наталя Григорівна.
Так, дуже вдячна пані Інесі за такий цікавий вебінар. Після вашої інформації деякі питання вже склалися в тому. Ми подивилися, що частково наше законодавство відповідає вашому, десь, або так само, скажімо, у нас теж законами, окремими законами регулюється доступ до професій. На жаль, у нас немає загального закону цього базового, і будемо вдячні за допомогу в його підготовці цього закону. Так, у нас виникає питання, що занадто зарегульовані деякі професії, і, можливо, варто було б зняти цю дерегуляцію. І теж будемо вдячні за вашу допомогу. Дякуємо.
Дякуємо, пані Наталя. Тоді я передаю слово модераторці, бо, ще раз говорю, час спливає. Пані Світлана зараз ще раз окреслить наші домовленості, ну і все, що відбулося на цьому вебінарі. Будь ласка, пані Світлана.
Дякую, пані Іно. Так, час дійсно спливає. Сьогодні на вебінарі нас поінформовано щодо практики впровадження законодавства у сфері регулювання професій в розрізі визнання професійних кваліфікацій для доступу до професійної діяльності у Дружній Республіці Латвія. Практично, детально, відкрито. Ми обов'язково врахуємо і застосуємо отримані знання при формуванні законодавчої бази щодо регулювання професій. Всі питання, що були задані в чаті, ми їх беремо до уваги і відповімо на них, як було сказано, на наших веб-ресурсах. Це був перший вебінар, присвячений визнанню професійних кваліфікацій для регульованих професій, і ми принагідно запрошуємо всіх учасників до наступного вебінару, аби доєднались ви, який заплановано на 21 серпня, і слідкуйте за оновленнями і повідомленнями від Національного агентства кваліфікацій. Наразі хочемо подякувати нашій спікерці, старшій експертці, координаторці з питань визнання професійних кваліфікацій Департаменту політичних ініціатив та розвитку Міністерства освіти і науки Республіки Латвії пані Інесе Стуре. Дякуємо вам. Нашим перекладачам, які супроводжували синхронний переклад, це пані Валентина Пшоняк та пані Ярослава Петренко. Дякуємо вам. Також дякуємо за організацію та підтримку проєкту Skill for Recovery. А також дякуємо всім учасникам заходу у зацікавленості щодо такої важливої теми і бажаємо вам гарного, спокійного дня та до зустрічі.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye.
До зв'язку,
До
пані
побачення.
Інесо.
Bye.
Бережіть себе. Тримаємо
До
за вас
побачення.
кулачки, щоб стресу не було.
See you. Yeah.
Have a
Will
nice
be-
day.
Дякуємо.
Everything will be
До
good.
побачення.
Yeah.
До побачення. Так. Пане Валерію, будь ласка, учасників, перелік. І всі питання, які були, нам необхідно їх буде викачати для того, щоб надати, по-перше, направити для пані Інеси, по-друге, отримати від неї відповідь і надати відповідь по всіх питаннях. Допоможете нам, пане Валерію, це?
Так, зрозуміло.
Чи ми можемо виключатися, чи нам ще необхідно трошки повисіти, щоб ви
Ні, я думаю, що ви вже можете виходити. Да, я зараз буду теж завершувати конференцію.
Тобто ви самі тут
Так.
впораєтесь, так?
Все, всім
Все,
дякую.
добре,
До
пані
побачення.
Світлано, чекаю вас у себе, як тільки ви зможете. Так, на все
Так,
добре.
так, добре.
Дякуємо.
До побачення.